Good evening, listeners. My name is EveningWhisperTales. Tonight, I'll be telling you some scary horror stories to help you relax and fall asleep. If you enjoy this channel, I'd really appreciate it if you like and subscribe. Now, let's begin our evening together. Story 1. The House That Waited for Us. When we first moved into the house, it didn't feel abandoned. That was the strange part. Most empty places have a kind of hollow quiet, a flat stillness like air that hasn't been disturbed in years. This place didn't have that. The silence felt layered instead, as if sounds had recently stopped rather than never existed. Even during the daytime walkthrough, while the realtor talked about insulation and the new wiring, I kept expecting to hear someone moving in another room. My wife noticed it too, though she didn't say anything until later. We bought the place anyway. It was older than we planned. Late 70s construction, but solid, and the neighborhood was quiet enough that our daughter could play outside without traffic passing every few minutes. The previous owners had moved quickly according to the paperwork. No listed reason, just relocation. They left behind curtains in several rooms and a set of wind chimes on the back porch. The wind chimes were the first thing that made the house feel occupied. They rang constantly, not loudly, not even enough to be annoying. Just soft, irregular notes, even on still evenings when the trees outside barely moved. My wife joked that the backyard funneled air in strange directions, but sometimes the sound came when the air inside the house felt heavier than outside. Our daughter liked them. She would sit on the kitchen floor coloring and hum along with the pattern, sometimes stopping and waiting as if the sound were answering her. We thought nothing of it. Kids react to small details adults ignore. The first week passed normally. We unpacked slowly, arguing over where furniture should go, adjusting to new nighttime sounds. Older homes always creak differently. The hallway expanded sound in odd ways, and footsteps from one end carried clearly to the other. More than once I thought my wife was coming toward me, only to find her outside in the yard. Then came the first night the hallway didn't behave like a hallway. I woke around 2 a.m. because I heard walking. Not random settling noises, pacing, measured steps moving from the living room to the kitchen, then back again. I assumed my wife couldn't sleep and went to check, but she was beside me, breathing evenly. The steps continued. I sat up, listening. Our daughter's door was closed, no light beneath it. The walking paused outside our bedroom, then slowly continued away. I opened the door. The house was dark and empty, yet the wind chimes rang softly from the kitchen doorway. Not outside, but inside the hall, just once, as if someone had brushed past them. I didn't tell my wife that night. I worked patrol for 6 years before transferring, and most calls blurred together after a while. You remember the big ones, accidents, domestics, the occasional arrest that actually goes bad. But 90% of the job is routine, noise complaints, welfare, checks, alarms triggered by loose windows. That's why the address didn't mean anything the first time. Dispatch sent me to 214 Weller Street for a welfare check just after midnight. Neighbor reported lights on inside for days but hadn't seen the homeowner. Nothing unusual. I knocked, announced myself, waited, no answer. I walked the perimeter, checked windows, locked, mail stacked in the box but not overflowing. I cleared the call in under 10 minutes. 2 nights later, I got the same address again. This time, it was an open 911 call, breathing, no voice. When dispatch played it over the radio, it sounded like someone holding the phone too close to their face. Slow breathing, steady, not distressed, almost patient. I knocked longer that night, still no answer. I remember noticing the porch light was warm, like it had been on a while, but the bulb inside was LED. Shouldn't get warm that fast. I put my hand near it twice just to be sure. I don't know why I remember that detail. You latch onto strange things when nothing else is happening. Cleared again. A week passed before I saw it a third time. 214 Weller Street. Alarm activation. My partner joked I should just move in at that point. Same routine, same silence. But this time I walked farther around the back. The yard was overgrown, grass tall enough to brush my knees, and there were footprints leading from the patio door into the yard. One set, barefoot. They stopped halfway to the fence. No return prints. I stood there longer than I should have. Dispatch asked for status twice before I answered. I marked it as unfounded and went back to the car. But the whole drive I kept replaying the way the prints ended. Not like someone turned around, just stopped existing mid-step. That night I wrote the report and forgot about it, until the phone at the station rang at 3:12 a.m. The desk officer waved me over because the caller asked specifically for the officer who'd been to Weller Street. We don't usually do that. Callers don't know our names, but I picked up anyway. No one spoke, just breathing, same as the open 911 call. I asked if they needed help. A long pause followed, then a quiet voice finally said, "You already came. You didn't check upstairs." Then the line disconnected. The problem was, that house didn't have a second floor. I didn't tell anyone about the phone call right away. You learn pretty quickly not to bring every strange moment into the locker room. Most things have normal explanations once you give them time. Crossed lines, prank calls, neighbors with too much curiosity. I figured it would be one of those. Still, the comment bothered me. You didn't check upstairs. The property file listed the house as a single-story ranch built in 1978. I'd walked the exterior twice already, and there was no addition, no attic access visible outside, nothing that suggested a second level. But around 1 a.m., the next night dispatch assigned the address to another unit. I switched my patrol route without saying why. When I arrived, Officer Henley was parked at the curb writing notes on his steering wheel. He rolled the window down and asked if I lived on the block because I'd pulled up fast. I told him I'd handled previous calls there and offered to help clear it. He shrugged. Less paperwork for him. We knocked together. Same silence. He checked the side yard while I tried the back again. The patio door was still locked, but I noticed something I'd somehow missed before. A small rectangular panel in the hallway ceiling visible through the rear window. An attic hatch. Perfectly normal, except I was certain I hadn't seen it during earlier calls. Henley came back around and asked what I was staring at. I told him I wanted to check inside just to satisfy the repeated calls. We tried the door handle more out of habit than expectation. It opened. We both paused. No broken frame, no forced lock, just unlocked. The air inside felt warmer than outside despite the cold night. Not heated, just used, like someone had been moving around recently. The living room lights were off, but a lamp glowed faintly in the hallway. Henry called out. No answer. We cleared room by room. Empty kitchen, empty bedroom, bathroom dry and clean. Furniture minimal but not abandoned. Dishes in the sink, blanket folded on the couch. The whole time I kept glancing toward the ceiling panel. Finally, I pulled the hallway chair beneath it and pushed the hatch upward. It resisted slightly, then opened with a soft scrape. Warm air drifted down, not dusty attic air, warmer than the hallway, carrying a faint smell of laundry detergent. I shined my flashlight on flooring, flat boards, not beams, and the edge of the wall. I remember lowering the light and looking at Henry because I didn't want to be the first to say it. "There's a room up there." He climbed the chair beside me and looked. The beam of his light showed the same thing, a finished space above a house that officially didn't have one. We didn't go up right away. Department policy meant waiting for property verification unless exigent circumstances existed. No sounds, no movement, no distress. So we documented it, secured the door, and left. But as I walked down the driveway, I heard a soft step above us. One slow footfall crossing the ceiling directly overhead. Henry heard it too. We both looked back at the roof. No second story, just shingles and the faint outline of an attic vent. We went back the next afternoon, not officially. No dispatch call, no report started. I told Henry I wanted another look at daylight, just to clear the weirdness from my head, and he admitted he'd been thinking about it too. Officers don't like loose details. A finished room where there shouldn't be one counts as a loose detail. The house looked smaller in daylight. That was the first thing I noticed. At night, the shadows stretched the roofline, but under the sun it was obviously a single-story structure. No dormers, no raised pitch, no sign the interior space we'd seen could physically exist. We knocked again, still unlocked. Inside it smelled faintly like coffee this time, recent enough that I instinctively expected someone to answer. Henry even called out, casual, like a resident might just be in the shower. Nothing. The hallway chair still sat under the ceiling hatch where we'd left it. I climbed up without saying anything and pushed the panel open. Bright light spilled down. Not flashlight, sunlight. I pulled myself up halfway and stopped. There was a hallway above us, a narrow one, carpeted, lit by daylight from a window I knew didn't exist from outside. The air was warmer up there, lived in warm, the kind of temperature people keep when they've been home all day. Somewhere above, I heard the soft clink of ceramic touching the counter. Henry asked quietly what I saw. "And upstairs," I said, which sounded ridiculous even as I said it. We both knew we shouldn't enter without cause, but standing there felt worse than going. I lifted myself fully into the space. The floor held my weight without creaking. Behind me, Henry followed. The hallway stretched about 20 feet, ending in a doorway where light pooled across the carpet. Family photos lined the walls, normal photos, vacations, birthdays, except I didn't recognize the people in them. A couple and a young boy, aging naturally from frame to frame. At the end of the hall, a kitchen. I stepped toward it slowly. On the table sat 2 mugs, one still steaming. A chair slid slightly against the floor ahead of us. Not moved fast, just a gentle push someone makes when standing up. Henry whispered, "Sir?" From somewhere just beyond the doorway, a calm voice answered, "I told you he didn't check upstairs." We rounded the corner. The kitchen was empty, but the back door, a door that shouldn't lead anywhere because we were above ground level, stood open to bright afternoon light and the sound of a neighborhood we weren't standing in. I looked out and saw a street, not Weller Street, different houses, different cars, kids riding bikes past the driveway. Henley grabbed my arm and pulled me back. When we turned around, the hallway behind us was gone, just the attic hatch opening above the original single-story house. The chair sat beneath it exactly where we'd left it. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Henley refused to go back up first. We stood in the hallway staring at the open hatch, neither of us wanting to say out loud what we'd both just seen. The air inside the house felt ordinary again. Cooler, faint dust smell and distant traffic, like the moment upstairs had been sealed away the second we looked back. "You saw the street too," he finally said. I nodded. Different neighborhood, not even the same part of town judging by the houses. I knew every block around Weller Street from patrol routes. None of them matched what was outside that upstairs door. We closed the hatch, not slammed, just slowly pushed it shut until it rested flat against the ceiling again. For a long time we stood there expecting to hear movement above us, but nothing came. Protocol said we should notify a supervisor, maybe request a building inspection. Instead, we left. Neither of us said that out loud either, but the understanding was mutual. Whatever report we wrote wouldn't make sense on paper, and once something is officially written, it stops being yours. Other people start handling it. 3 nights passed, then dispatch sent me back again. Open line 911, same address. This time Henley was on another call across town, so I went alone. I remember wishing I'd waited for backup, but routine pulls you forward. You answer calls even when you don't want to. The porch light was on before I even parked. I walked up slower than before, listening. No wind, no dogs barking, just a faint electrical hum houses make late at night. The door was closed now, locked. I knocked and announced. A voice answered immediately from inside, calm and clear. "You didn't stay last time." I felt my throat tighten before I realized I was speaking. "Police department, can you open the door?" "No," the voice said gently. "You always leave before you see the rest." I don't know why I tried the knob anyway. It opened. The interior looked slightly different. Same furniture but arranged tighter, as if someone had adjusted it by memory rather than measurement. The hallway lamp glowed again. I stepped inside alone. My radio crackled behind me with dispatch asking for status. I told them checking interior and set it low on my shoulder. Halfway down the hall, I heard movement overhead again. Slow pacing directly above my steps, matching me. I stopped. It stopped. I walked. It walked. I reached the chair beneath the hatch. It was already pulled out. I don't remember deciding to climb, but my hands were on the frame, lifting the panel before I'd fully thought about it. Warm air drifted down again. This time, before I pulled myself up, the voice spoke directly above me. "You were closer last time." I froze on the chair. "Closer to what?" I asked. A pause, then softly, "To when you lived here." My radio burst to life with dispatch repeating my name urgently, but the sound felt far away compared to the quiet just beyond the ceiling. I climbed up. The hallway upstairs was darker now. Evening instead of day, but the same photos lined the wall. I walked toward them slowly, shining my flashlight across the frames. The couple in the pictures, the child between them. In the last photo, standing beside them, was me. Not current, me, younger, academy haircut. The uniform from my first year on the job. The date in the corner read 12 years earlier. From behind me, the kitchen chair slid across the floor. "Shift change soon," the voice said gently, like reminding someone not to be late. I turned toward the kitchen. A man stood at the counter pouring coffee into 2 mugs. He wore my old patrol jacket, and he looked exactly the way I did when I first started. Down below, my radio shouted that my cruiser had been sitting with the door open for 7 minutes. But upstairs, the man handed me the second mug and said, "You're early. You haven't left yet." I didn't take the mug. For a few seconds, I just stared at him, trying to find something off. A detail that would let my brain file this under prank, hallucination, exhaustion. Anything that belonged to the real world I understood, but every small thing was right. The old jacket patch I'd had replaced after my first month, the cheap watch I wore before I could afford a better one, even the faint scar near my thumb from a training exercise I'd completely forgotten about until that moment. He waited patiently, arms still extended. "Shift starts soon," he said again, like he'd already repeated it once. I looked back down the hallway behind me. The attic hatch was gone. In its place stood a closed bedroom door. White paint, brass knob, and the carpet beneath my feet no longer matched the worn attic boards I remembered climbing onto. It matched the photos on the wall. The whole space felt settled, stable, like it had always been there, and the house below was the strange addition. My radio crackled faintly from somewhere far away, but it sounded muffled, like it was inside a drawer. I asked the first question that came to mind. "What year is it?" He frowned slightly, not confused, concerned. "You alright? You hit your head or something?" He set the mug on the counter and stepped closer. Up close, he looked even more familiar, not just appearance, but posture. The way he stood slightly angled like his vest still felt stiff. I remembered doing that my entire first year. I backed away. "I don't live here," I said, though the sentence sounded uncertain even to me. He studied my face longer this time. "You've been doing doubles again, haven't you? You always get like this when you don't sleep." He gestured toward the hallway. "Go shower, I'll finish the coffee." And that sentence did something to me. Not because it was strange, but because it was normal. The tone of someone who had said the same thing 100 times before. I knew where the bathroom would be before I turned. Second door on the right. I opened it slowly. Inside sat toiletries I recognized from another part of my life. The cheap razor brand I used when I first moved out. A towel color I hadn't owned in over a decade. My reflection in the mirror looked older than the person in the kitchen, but not by much, like time had folded unevenly. Behind me, footsteps crossed the hallway. I stepped back out. The man, me, now stood near the front door, putting on his duty belt. "You coming?" he asked. I felt my chest tighten. "Where?" He gave a small smile. 214 Weller. Alarm activation, same as last week. The air went cold. I followed him to the door before I realized I had already accepted the moment as real. The porch outside was brighter than it should have been. Late afternoon sun stretching long shadows across the yard. A patrol cruiser sat in the driveway, older model. Department markings from years ago. He walked down the steps ahead of me and paused beside it. "You riding or driving?" I looked back at the house. A single-story ranch, no second floor, no attic hatch, just a normal house on a normal street. And for the first time, I noticed the mailbox name. My last name. He opened the driver door and looked back again. "You alright? You look like you just got here." I realized then why the voice had sounded patient every time. It had been waiting for me to catch up. I didn't get in the cruiser. I stayed on the sidewalk, staring at the house, trying to hold on to the one clear fact I still had. I'd already lived the years between that younger version and now. I knew where they led. Transfers, partners, cases. The day I almost quit after my first fatal accident call. If I got in that car, I wasn't sure which direction time would move. He leaned against the door waiting, not impatient, just certain I would follow eventually. "We're gonna be late," he said. "We always hate paperwork when we're late." The familiarity of the complaint hit harder than anything else. It was a sentence I'd heard in my own head for years. The way you nail over your habits without noticing. I stepped closer to the cruiser and looked inside. The radio unit was older, the dash computer bulkier. Even the small coffee stain near the gear shift was one I remembered cleaning a dozen times and never fully removing. I could hear faintly, very faintly, another radio somewhere far away calling my current badge number, like two shifts overlapping, one fading while the other sharpened. I asked him quietly, "How many times have we gone to this call?" He thought about it. "Couple weeks now," he said. "Always the same. No one answers." My chest tightened. "Do we ever go upstairs?" He looked confused. "There is no upstairs." For the first time, the certainty in his voice cracked something in me, because I remembered believing that once too, knocking, clearing, leaving, never checking above me, because the house didn't have anything above me yet. I stepped back from the cruiser. He watched me carefully now. "You're doing that thing again," he said, like you know something already happened. I almost told him everything. Years of patrols, the attic, the voice. But I realized it wouldn't matter. He wasn't waiting for information. He was waiting for me to become him. The same shift, the same calls, again. I looked at the house one last time and said, "I already went." He frowned. "To this call," I said. "For years." Silence stretched between us. The wind moved through the trees differently now, colder. The sunlight dimmed slightly, like a cloud crossing the sky was clear. He studied my face, really studied it, and for a moment recognition flickered there. Not understanding, but recognition. Then the radio on his shoulder crackled. A dispatcher's voice I hadn't heard in over a decade read out the address. 214 Weller Street. He looked at the house, then back at me. "You stayed," he said slowly. The porch light turned on by itself. The front door opened. From inside, the same calm voice called out gently, "You can come upstairs now." The younger me took a step toward the door. I grabbed his arm. He felt solid, real, and he looked startled, the same way I used to react when a partner suddenly stopped me before entering somewhere. "If you go in," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "you'll keep coming back here, over and over. You won't remember leaving." The voice inside the house waited patiently. He looked from me to the open doorway. The hesitation in him was the first real change in the pattern. For the first time, the call wasn't routine. He stepped back. The moment he did, the world lurched, not visually, but like pressure shifting in my ears. The yard dimmed, the cruiser faded slightly, and I heard my current radio suddenly clear and loud. "Unit 12, status check." I blinked. I was standing in the real hallway again, halfway up the chair beneath the attic hatch, my hand gripping the frame. Below me, my cruiser lights flashed through the front window, engine still running. The warm air above cooled. Instantly, no hallway, no kitchen, just a dark attic space with insulation and beams. My shoulder mic blared again. "Unit 12, respond." I climbed down slowly, every movement heavy like I'd been awake for days. Outside, neighbors had stepped onto porches from the idling lights. I cleared the call, false alarm, voice steadier than I felt. Before leaving, I checked the mailbox one last time. Different name, not mine. Back at the station, I pulled the original property records. The house had only ever had one owner, a patrol officer, lived there 12 years. Transferred after repeated reports, he kept responding to the same call even while off duty. No forwarding address listed. The last note in the file was written by a supervisor long retired. Officer believes he keeps arriving before he leaves. Reassigned for rest. I never went back to Weller Street again, but sometimes near the end of shift, the radio clicks softly and I hear my own younger voice checking an address before I've been dispatched. Story 2. The room in my basement was still occupied. A few years before I transferred out of night shifts, my sister asked if she and her daughter could stay with me just for a week. Her apartment building had water damage from a burst pipe. Insurance needed time, and she didn't want to keep my niece bouncing between hotels. I had a small house, 2 bedrooms and a finished basement, quiet street, safe neighborhood. It made sense. The first 2 days were normal. My niece Emma was 7 and fascinated by everything in my place, especially the basement because I almost never used it. I kept storage down there, boxes from my parents' house, old furniture, a treadmill I swore I'd fix. She kept asking if she could play there, and I kept telling her only if the light stayed on. On the 3rd night, she asked me why someone knocked when she was already downstairs. I assumed she meant the pipes. Old houses shift, especially at night. I told her that, and she nodded, but in the distracted way kids do when adults give explanations that don't match what they experienced. The next evening, my sister mentioned Emma didn't want to sleep in the guest room. She says someone keeps opening her door halfway and watching. I checked the hinges, the frame, nothing loose. Windows closed, no drafts. I even stayed in the hallway after putting her to bed. The door never moved. Around 1:30 a.m., I woke to a sound I recognized immediately from work. 3 slow knocks, not random, intentional, coming from downstairs. I grabbed the flashlight I kept on the nightstand out of habit and walked to the basement door. The house was quiet except for the refrigerator hum and the soft breathing from the hallway bedrooms. I stood there a moment, listening. Nothing. I opened the door and flipped the light switch. The stairs lit up empty. Halfway down, I saw the basement light already on. I was certain I'd turned it off earlier. At the bottom, I checked every corner, storage shelves, laundry area, behind the water heater. No one there. But one of the boxes had been pulled slightly away from the wall. I pushed it back and went upstairs. In the morning, Emma asked if I'd found the man. I asked what man. The one who knocks so you know he's home, she said casually over cereal. He didn't last night. I asked what she meant by home. She pointed toward the basement. He said he used to sleep there before he moved his room. My sister looked at me, waiting for me to correct her. I didn't, because the basement used to be a bedroom. The previous owner mentioned it during closing. He'd converted it years earlier before moving out after a divorce. I hadn't told Emma that. That night, I checked the property listing photos. In the old pictures, the basement room had a bed exactly where my storage shelves now stood, and in one photo, barely noticeable. In the corner reflection of a dark TV screen, someone was standing at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at the camera. I didn't show my sister the photo right away. I told myself it was just a trick of reflection, low resolution, bad lighting, maybe even something left behind during staging before the house was sold. But once you notice a shape where a person could stand, your brain keeps filling in the outline, no matter how long you stare. Emma didn't help. Kids move on from imaginary things quickly if they're imaginary. She didn't. She kept asking small questions in passing, not scared, just curious, like she was trying to understand someone's habits. Why does he only knock at night? Why doesn't he like the hallway light? Did you know he waits until you're asleep? I asked her what he looked like. She shrugged, like someone who lives here. That answer bothered me more than any description would have. The fourth night, my sister asked me to check on Emma because she kept talking after bedtime. I opened the guest room door quietly and saw her sitting upright, facing the corner, whispering. She wasn't playing, she was listening. I asked who she was talking to. She answered normally, not embarrassed. He says you keep moving his things. I felt the back of my neck tighten. What things? She pointed toward the basement floor. The heavy ones. He said they were supposed to stay by the wall. I didn't sleep much after that. Around 2 a.m., I heard movement downstairs again. Not knocks this time, but the faint scrape of cardboard shifting slowly across concrete. I went to the basement door and listened. One long drag. Pause. Another. I opened the door quickly and turned on the light. Everything was still, but 3 boxes had moved away from the wall in a straight line toward the stairs. I checked the windows, the bulkhead, every lock, all secure. As I turned to leave, something tapped once behind me, not loud, just a knuckle against wood, from inside the wall behind the shelves. I stepped back slowly and pressed my ear to the drywall. Silence at first, then a soft voice, distant but clear enough to understand. You put my bed in the hallway again. Emma woke up crying upstairs at the exact same moment. My sister ran into the hall asking what I'd done. I didn't answer because I suddenly realized something I hadn't considered before. The bedroom in the old listing photos had no door leading upstairs, only a staircase leading down. The next morning, I finally showed my sister the listing photos. She didn't react the way I expected, no disbelief, no laughing it off. She stared at the basement picture longer than necessary, then zoomed in on the corner where the reflection stood. That's where Emma keeps pointing, she said quietly. I hadn't told her that part. We decided to move the storage shelves completely, just to prove to ourselves there was nothing there. It took most of the afternoon, boxes up the stairs, treadmill dragged across the floor, dust thick enough to make us cough. Emma watched from the top step the whole time, unusually quiet. When we cleared the wall, we found an outline on the concrete. A rectangle darker than the rest of the floor, like something heavy had sat there for years and protected it from wear. Exactly bed-sized. Emma asked if she could come down now. I almost said no, but she'd already started walking. She stepped onto the rectangle and looked toward the wall, listening. He says thank you, she told us. Then she pointed to the drywall above it. There's a door. There wasn't, but when I knocked, the sound was hollow, not the dull, solid thud of foundation. I grabbed a screwdriver and pushed against the panel seam. The drywall flexed inward slightly. My sister told me to stop. I didn't. I cut a small square out. Behind it wasn't dirt or insulation. It was another room. Not large, maybe 5 feet deep, sealed entirely behind the finished wall. Old carpet, yellowed wallpaper, and a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling with a pull chain. No windows, no exit, just a mattress frame still bolted to the floor. My sister pulled Emma upstairs immediately, but Emma didn't seem scared. She kept looking back down the stairs, almost concerned. That night, none of us slept well. At 1:12 a.m., the basement light clicked on by itself. At 1:14 came the first knock. not from downstairs, but from inside the wall behind the guest bedroom. 3 slow taps. Emma whispered from her bed, calm and certain. He moved back upstairs. I went to the hallway and pressed my hand against the wall where the knocking came from. The temperature there was warmer than the rest of the house, and something pressed lightly back. I didn't pull my hand away right away. For a few seconds I just stood there, palm flat against the drywall, feeling the faint pressure on the other side. Not pushing, more like someone resting their hand where mine was, matching it exactly. My sister called my name from Emma's room, voice tight. I stepped back and the warmth faded instantly, leaving the wall cold and ordinary again. We all stayed in the same room that night. Emma fell asleep first. Kids adjust faster than adults when something stops being surprising. My sister didn't sleep at all, and neither did I. We sat on opposite sides of the bed listening to the house. Pipes, distant cars, normal things, waiting for the knocking again. It didn't come. Instead, just before dawn, I heard footsteps in the basement. Slow, careful steps moving across concrete, then onto the stairs. Each step distinct, the weight of someone trying not to wake the house but not worried about being heard either. They stopped outside the bedroom door, a pause. Then the door handle turned slightly and returned to its place without opening. Emma murmured in her sleep, "He checks every morning." The next day, I contacted the previous owner, using the number from the closing paperwork. He sounded relieved someone finally called about the house, like he'd been expecting it. I didn't tell him anything specific at first, just asked about the basement renovations. Long silence. Then he asked, "Did you move the shelves?" I didn't answer. He exhaled slowly. He hated when we covered the room. The man explained that before they finished the basement, his teenage son used the lower space as a bedroom. After an accident, he never described it fully. They sealed it off during remodeling, said it was easier than tearing everything out. I asked why they didn't remove it entirely. He said they tried. Every time they emptied the room, objects from the house ended up back inside overnight. Tools, boxes, once even a chair from the kitchen. After a week, they rebuilt the wall. I asked why they moved. Another long silence. Because he started sleeping upstairs again. That night, I locked the basement door. Around 2 a.m., Emma woke me gently instead of crying. "He doesn't like the door closed," she whispered. I told her to go back to bed. She shook her head. "He says you're in his room now." From downstairs came the slow sound of the basement door unlocking, the deadbolt turning with deliberate care. I knew I'd locked it. The hinges creaked open. Footsteps began climbing. My sister grabbed my arm as the steps reached the top. They stopped just outside the bedroom, and for the first time, a voice spoke clearly from the hallway. "You move my bed again." My sister squeezed my arm hard enough to hurt. Neither of us moved toward the door. We just listened, the way you listen when you already know something is there, and opening the door won't change it. The hallway stayed quiet after the voice. Not empty, quiet. Waiting, quiet. Emma sat up beside us. She didn't look scared. She looked tired, like someone woken too early for school. "You should answer," she said softly. I shook my head. The doorknob turned halfway and stopped. No force, no rattling. Just pressure held there for several seconds before easing back. Then came 3 slow knocks, and gentler than before. My sister whispered, "Tell it to go away," but the tone outside didn't feel threatening. That was the worst part. It sounded like someone trying to solve a problem we kept causing. Emma slid off the bed before I could stop her and walk to the door. I reached for her, but she was faster, small hand already on the knob. I opened it instead. The hallway was empty, but the air felt warmer in a narrow shade directly in front of us, like someone standing close enough to block the cooler air from the vent. I could almost map shoulders and height just by the temperature change. Emma looked up at the space and frowned. "He doesn't know where to sleep now." I forced myself to ask, "Where does he think he is?" She pointed down the hallway toward my bedroom, the one I'd been using since moving in. "You took his room upstairs, you put his downstairs." I understood then what the previous owner meant. The basement hadn't been sealed to remove the room. It had been sealed to keep it in place. We had moved everything above it. I went downstairs slowly, every step deliberate. The basement door stood open exactly as I had heard. The hidden room behind the cut drywall felt warmer than the rest of the basement, even without the bulb on. Inside, the metal bed frame was still bolted to the floor. I dragged a mattress from storage and set it onto the frame. Nothing happened immediately, but as I stepped back into the basement, the overhead light flicked off once, then on. Not a malfunction flicker, a deliberate pull of the chain inside the hidden room. Upstairs, Emma called down calmly. "He says that's better." For the first time since they'd arrived, the house felt still. Not empty, settled. My sister and Emma moved back to her apartment a week later after repairs finished. I kept the basement as it was. I never sealed the room again, never moved the mattress. Months passed normally, until one night around 2 a.m., long after they'd left, I woke to 3 slow knocks from upstairs, from my bedroom door, and a familiar quiet voice said gently, "You're in the wrong room again." I didn't open the bedroom door right away. For a long moment I just lay there listening, hoping I'd imagined it, some leftover half-dream mixing with memory. The house was silent again, the same deep silence I'd grown used to over the past few months. Ever since I'd put the mattress back in the hidden room, nothing else had happened. No knocks, no footsteps, no voices, until now. I sat up slowly and checked the time. 2:07 a.m., exactly the hour Emma always woke before. The hallway light outside my room was off, but a thin, warmer glow edged beneath the door. Not bright enough to be a lamp, more like light traveling from farther away. I stood and walked to the door, pausing with my hand on the knob. "You moved my bed again," the voice said quietly from the other side. Not accusing, just tired. I opened the door. The hallway was empty, but the air felt wrong. Warmer near the floor, cooler higher up, like heat rising from the staircase leading down. I stepped into the hall, and the warmth shifted ahead of me, retreating slowly toward the basement door. I followed. Each step down the stairs matched the faint sound of another step just ahead, staying exactly one pace out of sight. The basement light was already on when I reached the bottom. The hidden room stood open. The mattress I'd left on the frame was still there, but the sheets from my upstairs bed were folded neatly on top of it. I knew I hadn't brought them down. I walked back upstairs. My bed was bare. Pillow gone too. Back downstairs, the pillow now rested against the wall in the hidden room, positioned as if someone had tried to make it comfortable but remembered imperfectly how. I stood in the doorway, unsure what to say. Finally I asked, "Is this where you want me?" The pull chain clicked softly once. I didn't sleep in my bedroom that night. I slept in the basement room. The air stayed warm, steady, almost calm. The same settled feeling from the week Emma stayed. No knocks, case, no footsteps, no voice, just quiet. In the morning, I woke upstairs, in my own bed, sheets back in place. Since then, every few months, I wake to find the bedroom door open and the hallway warmer than it should be. And the next morning, I'll notice something small move back downstairs. Never aggressively, never fast, just corrected. I stopped trying to keep that room unused because I don't think the house wants two people living in the same space at once. Story 3, the last case. I worked never closed. I wasn't supposed to take the call. I'd already transferred out of patrol and into evidence processing, quieter work, paperwork, logging items, helping detectives build timelines after the fact. No more 3 a.m. knocks, no more rushing to unknown situations alone. That was the point. But one night they were short and a supervisor asked if I could ride along just to secure a scene until detectives arrived. Single house, possible break-in, no reported injuries, routine. The address didn't look familiar when dispatch read it out, but the street did as I drove closer. One of those older neighborhoods where every house was built from the same plan, porches evenly spaced, trees planted at identical distances decades ago. Officer Patel met me at the curb, front door open, no movement inside. Neighbor had called after hearing furniture shift around. Midnight. We cleared it together, living room, kitchen, bedrooms. Nothing disturbed except a chair pulled away from the dining table. No broken locks, no forced windows, just opened. Patel joked maybe the homeowner sleepwalked and forgot. Then we reached the back hallway. There was a door at the end, slightly ajar. I remember thinking the hallway felt longer than it should have for that size house. My flashlight barely reached the end clearly. I pushed the door open, empty bedroom. No furniture except a desk and a single box of papers stacked neatly on the floor. Dust everywhere else, except around the box, like it had been placed recently. We waited for detectives and I logged the item, kneeling to open it carefully. Inside were case folders, police case folders, dozens of them. Everyone labeled with the same incident number. I flipped one open. Photographs slid partially out. Crime scene photos from inside that exact bedroom. Same walls and same carpet. Pattern, same door frame, but older. Yellowed edges on the prints. Victim listed, male, 42. Cause, undetermined. Date, 10 years earlier. I called the number into dispatch to verify. They confirmed it had been a real case, unsolved, from before I joined the department. While I was still on the radio, Patel asked quietly why I was listed in the responding officer section. I thought he was joking. I looked. My name was printed clearly on the report. Badge number correct, but the date was 5 years before I'd ever been hired. Before I could respond, the bedroom door behind us shut softly, not slammed, just closed. And from the other side of it, footsteps walked away down the hallway we just cleared. Patel grabbed the knob immediately and pulled. Locked. We both stared at it for a second because neither of us had heard a lock turn. Just the soft click of the latch seating into place. He knocked once, then harder. Police department. Open the door. No response. I radioed dispatch, asking if anyone else had entered while we were inside. They confirmed negative. We were the only 2 units on scene and no other cars had pulled up. The footsteps we'd heard continued anyway, not running, not hiding, just a steady walk away from the bedroom, fading toward the front of the house. Patel backed up and forced the door. It swung open immediately. The hallway was empty. We cleared the house again, slower this time, checking closets and crawl spaces we'd skipped earlier. Still nothing. The front door remained open exactly as before. Porch quiet, street empty. When we returned to the bedroom, the box of files was gone. The dust square where it had rested was still visible on the floor. We both stood there longer than necessary before Patel finally said, "You moved it while I was on the radio?" I hadn't. We searched the house a third time and found the box sitting on the dining room table, centered neatly beneath the overhead light. Neither of us remembered carrying it out. Inside, the same reports remained. My name still printed as responding officer. Patel suggested a database error. Old case auto-filled with current roster information somehow. But that didn't explain the printed photographs, the aged paper, the handwritten notes and margins, describing observations I recognized as my own phrasing. One line circled in pen, "Officer returned to hallway after hearing movement." I didn't remember writing that. Detectives finally arrived around 3 a.m. and we briefed them. They treated it like a historical evidence find. Old case materials left behind by previous occupants. And collected the box. We didn't mention the footsteps or the door. I went home thinking the unease would fade. It didn't. The next day, the lead detective called, asking why I'd reopened the case file from the archive that morning. I told him I hadn't been at the station yet. He sent a photo, security camera footage from the records room. At 6:12 a.m., hours after I'd left the scene, someone wearing my uniform entered, pulled the same case folder, and signed the checkout log using my badge number. The camera angle never showed the face, but the posture was identical to mine, and the timestamp showed I was still asleep at home when it happened. I went to the station immediately. The records clerk already had the folder waiting on the counter like she'd been expecting me. She asked why I'd come back twice in one morning, said I'd barely spoken the first time, just signed the log and left with the file. I told her that was impossible. She pointed at the checkout sheet, my signature, not close, exact. Even the small habit I have of crossing the 7 in my badge number with a line through the middle. I opened the folder right there. Same reports from the house, same photos, same date from 10 years earlier. But there was a new page, clipped to the front, typed, fresh paper, no aging. Incident narrative, written in present tense. Officer arrives on scene with partner. Reports hallway appears longer than expected. The timestamp printed at the bottom was from 20 minutes earlier. I looked at the clerk. Did anyone else add this? She shook her head slowly. I kept reading. Officer confirms hearing footsteps after securing bedroom. Officer does not remember writing prior report. The words tightened my chest because I hadn't told anyone that detail. Patel and I had agreed not to include the footsteps in our official statement, yet there it was. I flipped to the next page, blank, except for a single line waiting beneath the header, "Officer returns to residence alone." At that moment my phone rang. Patel. His voice sounded wrong, quiet and distant like he was standing outside in the wind. "You already here?" he asked. "Where?" "The house," he said. "Your cruiser's outside." I left the folder on the counter and drove. My car was the only one in my driveway when I left, but when I reached the street, I saw a patrol cruiser parked in front of the same house from the night before. My unit number, lights off, engine cold. I parked behind it slowly, heart pounding harder with each step toward the porch. The front door stood open again. Inside, the hallway stretched farther than I remembered. At the end, the bedroom door waited closed. From somewhere deeper in the house, I heard a voice. My voice, speaking calmly. I remember this part now. I didn't go in yet, because I suddenly knew why the case never closed. It wasn't waiting for a suspect. It was waiting for the officer who kept coming back. I stepped inside anyway. You don't spend years responding to calls without instinct pushing you forward, even when every other part of you says stop. The air in the house felt thicker than the night before, warm in patches, like someone had been walking just ahead of me. My cruiser key wasn't in my pocket. I hadn't noticed losing it, but the ignition outside still held it, turned halfway forward. The hallway stretched longer the farther I walked, the front door shrinking behind me faster than the distance I'd actually covered. The bedroom door at the end looked exactly the same size no matter how long I moved toward it, and from inside came my voice again, not talking to me, talking to someone else. I already checked this room, another voice answered, calm, patient. You always stop here. I reached the door and pushed it open. The bedroom was occupied. 2 figures stood inside. One was a man I didn't recognize at first, middle-aged, tired posture, until I noticed the photograph clipped in the case file, the victim from 10 years earlier. The other person standing beside the desk was me. Not reflection, not memory. Another version of me in uniform, 5 years. Younger than I am now, staring at the wall like he expected it to move. They didn't react to me entering. They were replaying something. You hear that? The other me said to the man. The man shook his head slowly. No one else is here. Footsteps sounded behind them, from the hallway, approaching the bedroom. The same steady pace Patel and I had heard the night before. My younger self turned toward the door, confused. I swear someone keeps walking around after we clear it. The man answered quietly. Officer, you came alone. You've been alone all night. I understood then. The original case. The responding officer had arrived without backup, and the house had kept him. The footsteps reached the doorway behind me. I stepped aside instinctively, but nothing entered. Instead, the younger me slowly looked past the victim, toward me. For the first time, he reacted. Recognition spread across his face. Not surprise, but realization. You came back, he said softly. The room shifted, not visually, but like the pressure of the air changed. And suddenly, I heard dispatch in my ear from years ago, faint and overlapping with the present. Status. I remembered answering that call once. Now I heard myself answering again from somewhere else in the house. The file's final blank line filled in my mind. Officer returns to residence alone. I stepped forward and said the only thing that felt different from the memory. You leave now. The younger me hesitated. The hallway footsteps stopped. The victim looked between us, confused like he'd never heard this part before. I repeated, you leave. Don't finish the search. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the younger version of me backed toward the hallway slowly, breaking the pattern. The bedroom dimmed instantly, the air cooling, walls settling into stillness, and the victim vanished with the shift, as if the moment no longer needed him there. I was alone in the empty room. My radio crackled, present time clear, unit status check. I stepped outside. My cruiser sat behind me where I'd parked it. Only one this time. No second car, no open file waiting to be written. The next morning, the detective called to say the old case file had disappeared from evidence overnight. Not misplaced, gone, like it had never been archived. They closed it officially, unresolved but inactive. I never saw my name listed on it again, but sometimes, late in quiet hallways, I hear distant footsteps stopping just before reaching me, like something checking whether I'm still there before moving on.